All right, guys, welcome into the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Matt Scalisi, I'm Simone Eli. Excited to chat with you guys this evening following Alabama's big win over New Mexico State. Kind of exactly the type of game that we expected to see from the Tide at home against an opponent that they were favored by 50. Going into this game, Matt, you were actually at the game, got a good feel for the environment, what everything was like there in Tuscaloosa. The Tide roll 59-3, the final over New Mexico State in week 11 of the season. Before we really break things down when it comes to offense, defense, injuries, things like that, just what was it like out there today?
I think it was this was an ideal game for folks who have not had a chance to get to Tuscaloosa this season. I think we had perfect weather today. It was the morning kickoff, so I think that contributed to maybe a lighter crowd. It certainly was not sort of a vintage, intense Bryant-Denny atmosphere, but I don't think anybody was expecting that going into this game. It was a game where I think everybody was expecting and knew that this was a much needed opportunity for Alabama to get their offense back on track after a really rough game last week. And I think they were able to do that. I think they, shook off some rust after about one drive and basically never looked back in this game.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions coming out of the LSU game, not so much about like this specific game, but about Alabama, what we saw from the offensive line. Bryce Young was sacked multiple times last week. I think a lot of folks were hoping to see exactly what they saw tonight when it comes to what Bryce Young was able to do offensively. Outside of the punt, Bama goes on to score multiple touchdowns in the first half. Bryce Young was 21 of 23, almost a perfect day for 270 and 5 touchdowns, just about as automatic as you could expect when it comes to what we saw on that side of the ball.
For sure. I mean, extremely efficient, accurate day for Bryce Young, which is what you want to see. And, I think bigger than that really was that they did a better job. I mean, look, New Mexico State is not LSU. They don't have the same caliber of player, but Alabama was able to give Bryce Young time and protection today. They were able to get some very valuable snaps as an offensive line unit together and get on the same page about how things are supposed to go. And I think the running game was what really needed to get going today more than anything else. And they were able to do that. Brian Robinson rushed for 99 yards on 9 carries. So, yeah. I mean, the big plays in the running game were there today. They were able to, really be explosive against a team that was not nearly their physical match. But I still think it's important to go through the motions and do that when you have the opportunity. And I think bigger than that, and we can get into the injury stuff, Simone, but as this team goes forward, they've got some real depth issues at the running back position, and they needed to see Trey Sanders have a good afternoon today, and he really did. I thought Trey Sanders looked the best that we've seen him since his accident, and they're going to need to lean on him a lot down the stretch, and I think it should be comforting to people to see Trey Sanders go and have a really solid outing in the second half of this game.
Yeah, this is the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. The Tide rolled to a 59-3 win in Week 11 over New Mexico State. And it's games like this where you always enter the game hoping to see kind of a tune-up and a cleanup in a lot of ways, but probably bigger than that, Matt, hoping to come out of the game healthy. That's always what, when you're facing an inferior opponent and you're favored by 50+, all you want is to see your guys to walk out of the stadium the way they walked in, and that's not the case necessarily for Alabama right now. You just brought up the running back position. Roydell Williams is expected to miss significant time. He's going to be out for a while, according to Nick Saban, and JoJo Earl, the Bama wide receiver, will also miss time. Matt, what is the latest that we know on those 2 injuries?
Well, thankfully, Saban did say that the JoJo Earl injury was not as bad as they initially feared. And I can tell you there was a lot of concern in the stadium. He was down for a very long time. Didn't look like he was putting any weight on either foot when he was being carried off the field. And it was one of those really, damper of a moment on an otherwise nice day for Alabama fans today. It was certainly. There was concern, I think, that his season would be over and possibly worse. Saban didn't sound nearly that pessimistic after the game, but I think you still have to imagine he's going to be missing some time. maybe the hope is you get him back for the postseason. We still, I think, are going to need to learn more on Monday. Now, as far as Roydell Williams, I think so far that sounds like the more concerning injury today because of the position in part, because Alabama was already getting thin at the running back spot, and losing Roydell Williams is a big blow for this rushing attack. I think you're going to start to see some other names practicing back there. We saw towards the end of the game, they started to move some guys from who are not technically running backs over to that position. They're starting to transfer some tight ends at that spot. I think the hope is that in these bigger games down the stretch that Brian Robinson will remain healthy enough that he can basically carry the load for this team. Mm-hmm. But I think it's gonna be tough. Alabama is not going to have a big stable of running backs to sort of share the load and share the workload and not rough up your main guy. They're really going to need Brian Robinson to kind of be the man down the stretch here for this rushing attack. Again, Trey Sanders having a good day was a positive thing that this team needed to see, but I don't know really where they turn after that. You're going to start to see some very unconventional things have to be done beyond Trey Sanders at running back.
No question. In years that we have seen Alabama be a dominant Alabama team, they have maybe had that premier back, but they've also had someone else to go to. If that premier back gets banged up, they need a break. You name it, he's not having to carry that load quite as much if he is just the only guy. If you look at what Williams has done this season, 47 attempts, 273 yards, and 1 touchdown. I know those numbers don't just totally blow you away, but the guy has been another option, has been one of those guys that can help carry those kind of junk yards when you need him in there in situations where you really don't want to see your main guy get banged up. So definitely something that that Bama's offense is going to have to just kind of deal with, that Bill O'Brien's going to have to navigate and kind of sort through, like you said. And how do they get creative, I guess? What do they do moving forward to handle that position when you're playing teams like Auburn, when you're playing teams like Georgia, when you're trying to do something in the postseason?
I mean, they had a better day today, obviously running the ball than they did a week ago. But I think we've already seen from the last few weeks that the ground game just isn't really a strength for this team regardless. And I don't think it necessarily had to do with running backs, although that doesn't help the situation. Yeah. But, I guess I'm not trying to say this as a silver lining necessarily, but I don't think this team, Simone, was ever going to go down the final stretch of the season here and win a national championship by running the ball 30, 40 times a game and just mowing people down like it's 2015 again. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was ever going to be this team's identity. So, I'm not saying that none of this stuff matters, but I am saying I think that Alabama was going to have to be creative offensively regardless. They were not going to be able to lean on a ground-heavy offense to succeed down the stretch here. I think we've seen them sort of find different ways to do something similar to running the ball. I think we saw a lot of passes out to the flats today, a lot of sort of screen passes, which are in some ways a different way of running the ball. And I think that's really where the skill lies on this team the most. It's those wide receivers. And getting the ball out to them is probably the main way that this team is ever going to move the ball. So, this is not a team that has as many weapons offensively as last year's team did, but they're losing more of them along the way, and they're going to have to compensate for that by getting a little bit more creative with their play calling.
Yes, no doubt about that. Let's talk quickly, talking about receiving. About Jameson Williams, just what he has brought to this program. And I understand New Mexico State is not Georgia. I mean, it's not like the most, premier team, and they're 1-9 now, 0-6 on the road. We knew what it was going to be. But at the end of the day, talk about explosive plays. I mean, the guy caught 6 balls for 158 yards, and 3 of those were touchdowns. I think I'm always impressed when Nick Saban and the Bama coaching staff is able to bring in a guy and just immediately insert him into what they want to do. They're not getting away from what they want to do. And to see someone have that amount of success in their system, in their scheme, it's just astounding to me. And Jameson Williams has been that guy all year.
I think so. And you know, I think there was a funny moment to me during this game today, late in the third quarter, I think, where it was at the end of the first half. Jameson Williams catches a ball on the sideline. They're kind of running a 2-minute offense. They want to get one more touchdown on the board. Jameson Williams catches one, takes off running. Looks like it's going to be a long touchdown reception for Jameson Williams. And they call it back. They said he stepped out of bounds. He was so mad for the entire rest of the drive. It's like it ruined his day that he didn't have that one more big touchdown with a bunch of yardage behind it. He is a competitor. He is a guy who is very fired up about being on this team and being the go-to guy in this offense. It very clearly means a lot to him. I think he is trying to find other ways to contribute to outside of just being a big, singular big play receiver. He has a lot of, I think I see a lot of sort of emotional leadership from him out on the field. Whereas Bryce Young, I think is a different kind of leader. I think he's more of a quiet, efficient, don't make mistakes, don't lose your cool when things aren't going well. And that's important to have too. But Jameson Williams is a spark, and I think helps get guys around him fired up. And he's very fun. He's fun to watch when he's doing his thing, but it's funny to see him in a moment like that where you're up 42-3, and he's mad that he didn't get one more touchdown on the board.
Those type of guys you want on your roster, though. You want to get guys who are going to get jacked up, get excited, and want to be competitors regardless of who the opponent is. If you guys just tune in, it's the Bama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Bama clicking really on all cylinders. They did trail in this game. Let's not forget that, for about 44 seconds, I think is what I read. But otherwise, the Bama defense doing exactly what the Alabama defense is expected to do in this game. I feel like checking every single box on that side of the ball, Matt.
For sure. Great defensive performance again. And, this is a team that was pretty limited in terms of the opponent. But I will say the quarterback, Johnson, is a talented guy, and he had some escapability. And, they weren't able to just be purely lazy with this team and have it handed to them. They did have to contain him. They had to be smart with their pass rush lanes in this game. And I thought Alabama's front seven did a really good job of totally bottling up New Mexico State. And it's what they're going to have to do, I think, on defense the next 2 weeks. Is they're going to face quarterbacks who are very dangerous and sort of multifaceted. That they're two quarterbacks that are threats running the ball and passing the ball legitimately. And no matter how the season is gone for Arkansas and Auburn, these are two teams with very talented quarterbacks, and this is going to be, maybe the toughest 2-game stretch that Alabama's had this year in terms of facing an opposing quarterback with the ability to hurt you in multiple ways. I think the Alabama defense is playing their best football of the season right now. It's a good time for them to be peaking, and I think they're probably pretty anxious to get out there and do what they've been doing against Arkansas and Auburn and make their way to Atlanta.
Yeah, before we let you go, let's look ahead, as you're saying, Matt. So Bama is going to be at home against Arkansas, on the road in the Iron Bowl against two teams that at this point really aren't playing for much other than pride and bowl position, maybe trying to get into a New Year's Six. Auburn maybe not so much after their loss today. But when you look at the SEC West standings, obviously A&M still in the mix. The Aggies play tonight, and right now they're only a 2-loss team. They would have the tiebreaker over Bama should the Tide drop an SEC game. So these 2 games for the Tide are very, very significant to end the season.
For sure. And they're not going to be easy games either because regardless of how things have gone for Arkansas and Auburn on a game-by-game basis, they match up well with Alabama individually. I think they are very tough teams on the line of scrimmage, and that's been difficult for Alabama this season on both sides. I think Alabama's defense is getting better in that regard this season. But as well as Alabama played today, I think they have a lot to prove still, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, and I think they can start to silence some of those doubts next week against Arkansas.
Yep. All right, guys. Alabama rolls today, 59-3, the final over New Mexico State. That's their last final tune-up before getting back into SEC play, closing the season against Arkansas and Auburn. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Alabama Postgame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Matt Scalisi, I'm Simone Eli. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.